Hi there, good evening, dear viewers of Dmrtv. Welcome to this other edition. It's a brand new edition of Dmrtv Debate, where we tackle issues that have to do with our daily lives, contemporary issues. It can be in religion, politics, society, or wherever, but we bring them on the table and give you a sound and incisive argument so that you should be adequately informed of the context which we debate the issues. So we welcome you again to this new edition this very weekend here from Boya, Cameroon. You're watching Dmrtv's Debate with me, Jude Mbako Munyo, as your moderator. My debaters are already here on the panel. I'll be introducing them to you in a very short while. Now, we are talking within the context of a world where belief and logic are at loggerheads, and how much do people really put their minds into the issues of into religious issues? How do they operate within this sphere is what we are going to be looking at with the topic faith is the suicide of reasoning. Faith is the suicide of reasoning. What do you think? Are you of the opinion that faith is the suicide of reasoning, or against this opinion? Just how much does faith contribute in one's logical reason? Well, my debaters are in the best position to expound and explicate on the issue that we are going to be debating on tonight. Now, if you are just joining us for the very first time, you can follow us on our social media platforms, notably Facebook, because this program is live and comes to you every Saturday from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. where we look at, we debate on topical issues. Tonight, let me introduce to you my debaters who are going to be having a heated debate on this issue. Those who are going to be debating for, like you see on the screen there, faith is the society of reasoning. We have Brother Jordan Mileki. Brother Jordan Mileki is a seminarian in the Diocese of Boya. He's going to be arguing for that motion, as well as his companion, Brother Franklin Fomokong. Both of them are not new members of this debate. They're always here on the panel, very incisive in their arguments, very sound in their methodology. Against the motion, we have on this other side of the panel, Brother Jude Aka Zong. He is going to be talking against that motion. He is a seminarian in the Diocese of Boya on pastoral here at Dmrtv as well. Then we have next to him, his arguing partner is Yannick Fonke. Yannick Fonke is a journalist, a trained journalist, and equally the programs director here at Dmrtv. Both of them are going to be talking against that motion that faith is the suicide of reasoning. And of course, we are going to set down the modalities. The first speaker has 8 minutes, the second speaker 6 minutes, and then the last person who is going to speak for and against the motion wrap up with 4 minutes of their argument. You at home, we also like to hear from you what you have as far as this is concerned. There's a number on your screen that you send us your opinions, your thoughts and ideas that we can share on this platform. But at the end of the day, we are equally going to hear what the church stands for as far as this is concerned, because recall that all these arguments are necessarily not the opinions of the debaters. They are for intellectual purposes and to keep you in the know of what is up. So tonight, this is Dmrtv's Debate. I would like us to have a brief breather. When I come back, I introduce the members of the, I'll take it straight away. Since I've introduced them, I'll take it straight away to the first debater of this evening. So let's have this breather. Right, you're welcome back. So, faith is society of reasoning. From those who are going to be arguing for, we have Brother Jordan. Brother Jordan, good evening.
Good evening, dear moderator.
I want to hear all of your voices. Brother Franklin Fomokom, good evening. Thanks for joining us.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator.
Yes. And for those against, Brother Jude Akazom, thank you for coming again tonight.
You are very much welcome, Mr. Jukumbaku.
Yes, this is not a brother, it's Yannick Funky, a colleague. Yannick Funky, thanks for coming.
Thank you very much.
Let's start the debate. 8 minutes for you, Brother Jordan Meleki. You're going to be advancing critical arguments for the motion that suicide is faith is the suicide of reasoning. 8 minutes, and it starts now.
Thank you, moderator. Greeting televiewers. I am for the motion that faith is a suicide of reasoning. For us to understand the core of our debate, permit me to define some preliminary terms. 1. Faith. It is a conviction, confidence, and trust in something or someone, often without any concrete evidence or proof. 2. Suicide. Suicide is the act of intentionally causing one's own death. 3. Reasoning. It originates from the Latin word ratio, which means to think. Putting these words together would point to the fact that an individual intentionally incapacitated from rational reflection or critical thinking. Permit me to define another word that is not found in the debate clause, but it is intrinsically linked to it. That is the word man. The word man here is used frequently to understand this topic. Here we are talking about faith killing the reason of man. Man from the Latin origin, Homo sapien, which means a being of reason, or sapientia, which means wisdom. According to Aristotle, man is a rational being, and that makes him different from a sentient or a vegetative soul. Only man is said to reason. If man is being limited to a sentient or vegetable soul, it means man and a dog or man and a cabbage, there is no difference. So for man to say he is living according to virtue, it is to say he is using his reasoning faculty properly. When reason takes a place, when faith takes a place proper to reason, it makes man a vegetable or a dog. But when reason takes its proper place, it makes man different between a cabbage and an animal. But on the contrary, if faith should replace reason, man will become like an animal, because even a dog has faith on the master. The dog believes that food will come at the proper time, and whatever the master does is correct. The dog believes that whenever the master opens the door is to give it the food. That is how man is being reduced when faith takes total control. But on the contrary, when man uses his reason, he begins to question and put real questions or probes into matters of existential reality that makes him more at home, or makes him reasons out everything which is beyond faith. He actually goes and seeks for the things which reason alone can identify. How can we define man and limit him to an animal when we have reduced man to faith? Reason has indirectly helped man to grow, whereas faith has directly killed man's reasoning. How can we define man who does not have reason but has faith? So faith killing reason reduces man's essence to an animal. Let us now examine the contemporary society and see how faith acts as a suicide of reasoning. Imagine a woman in the village who has faith, and the type of faith I'm talking about here is a fanatical faith, meaning an unreasonable faith. She believes everything her preacher or her pastor says. She goes to church, does everything under the instruction of the pastor because She is gullible due to the reason that faith alone has made her to be so. She has faith in God, and as such, everything that the pastor or the preacher says is the truth. She absorbs everything like a sponge absorbs water. She doesn't doubt. She accepts everything as reality. Now, the child is sick, and the preacher says, don't bother. Come, let us fast and pray, and your child will regain his health. So beautifully said. The woman who is suffering under financial condition decides to follow the preacher because that is the only option she has. After praying and fasting, because prayer and fasting become the pills for the child. Praying, fasting, and at the end the child dies. Don't you think somebody who is rational enough should immediately think once someone is sick, you head to a hospital and you see a doctor? But because of faith, she has lost her reasoning faculty, and she believes that faith can solve her problems, and she doesn't reason again. She did not do that out of bad will, but because she lacked the power to reason. It means she had been reduced to a mere vegetable, a mere dog. Just as a dog will obey the master's instruction, that is how she obeys the word of her preacher. So faith in that way acts as the suicide of reasoning. Again, we discover that after so many things has been done, a poor farmer harvests whatever he has from his farm produce, takes the best of it to the church, and offers it to the preachers in the name of harvest thanksgiving. At the end, that person stays behind and suffers in poverty, in the cold misery of pain, while the preacher lavishes at home. Any rational being or a rightful thinking person, do you think will act in such a manner? Faith is a suicide of reasoning. More to that, knowledge can only be obtained through experience and observation. Religious knowledge, which is based on faith rather than evidence, is no knowledge at all. According to Karl Marx, religion is the opium of the masses. It means religion drunkens the masses. Once you accept religion, you become drunken by it. You don't reason again. It means faith has killed your reasoning. You just follow whatever your preacher is saying because you are not drunken by it. In fact, they use faith or religion to brainwash the masses. It is a perfect form of exploitation. It's just a tool. Faith is just a tool of exploitation, which once you are being brainwashed, it reduces you to a vegetable, a dog that just simply follows instruction. Religious leaders brainwash people and they enrich themselves while the masses suffer under cold and poverty. So it serves as a suicide of reasoning, because any rightful thinking person, as man is supposed to be, ought to reason, ought to ask essential questions. Why am I giving this to this and that person? Why should I do this and other and not this other one? Why should I respect this preaching or this particular doctrine? Why don't I question it when they say it's dogmas? But they tie things and they reduce man to a certain level that man can no longer think, and everything they say, yes, my papa has said so, so it is. Faith is a suicide of reasoning. From all I have said, I think and I hold firmly to the fact that faith is a suicide of reasoning. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Jordan, for 8 minutes exactly. You've been able to expatiate your point, hearkening on the fact that faith is a suicide of reasoning, and if you continue basing on just illusionary things about faith, you'll miss out on your reasoning faculties. Now let's turn to the other side of the argument, or those against, and meet Brother Jude Aka Zong the very first speaker against that motion, who equally has 8 minutes to tell us that faith is not the society of reasoning. Brother George, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Junbaku, the moderator. Good evening, dear televiewers. Good evening to my colleagues on the other side of the panel. This evening, I will be arguing against the motion that faith is the suicide of reasoning. It was Aristotle, the great ancient philosopher, who began his metaphysics by saying that all men by nature desire to know. And what do they seek to know? The truth. Now, we understand that faith and reason are tools, are two instruments that we use to come to comprehension of the truth or attainment of the truth. That is the core of the debate. Before I move into my arguments, permit me to define some terms. The first one, of course, faith. Faith. What is faith? According to the Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 1814, faith is defined as the theological virtue by which we believe in God and all what He has revealed. The theological virtue by which we believe in God and all what He has revealed. That is faith. That is what I understand by faith. In a very loose sense, out of the context of the catechism, faith will simply be defined as believing something based on the testimony of another person. What is reasoning? Of course, reasoning is the third operation of the human mind. The Catechism of the Catholic Church in paragraph 37 defines reasoning as the ability, the natural ability in man to know the truth, understand the world, and discern good and evil. The natural ability in man to know the truth, understand the world, discern good and evil. I started by mentioning that reasoning is the third fundamental operation of the mind. The third, what is the first? The first operation of the human mind is assimilation, the ability of the mind to separate matter from form. For example, when I look at my opponents, I have the ability to keep away their flesh and blood and have a picture of them in my mind. They start existing in my mind. That is the first thing the mind does. The formation of concepts. What is the second thing the mind does? Judgment. The ability to relate the ideas that the mind has created. For example, in my mind, I have the idea of a rectangle. It's not a physical, I do not say a rectangular table as a rectangle. I have it in my mind. I have the idea of a table. When I put them together, that is judgment. That is the second operation of the mind. The third, reasoning, which is our bone of contention, is the ability of the mind to arrive at unknown truth from known truth. Simple example. The mind knows 1. The mind knows 2. And it has the ability to arrive at 1 + 1 = 3. The ability of the mind to arrive at unknown truth from known truth. Now, why did I take the pain of having to define faith, then reasoning? It is because I want us to understand that faith and reasoning are two operations are two sources of knowledge, of attaining the truth, and they in no way contradict each other or kill another. Now, when my opponent was talking, he quoted a fanatic, a woman who is a fanatic. Of course, fanatism is an obsession, an excess enthusiasm. In psychology, it is classified as a mental disorder. So it is not faith. It is not faith. That's not what we're talking about. That's obsession that can spring from being desperate. Desperation is not faith. What you were quoting about the woman whose daughter is sick, the farmer who harvests all, and that's not faith. Now, faith and reason are two complementary factors. I will do this by highlighting some principles. There are 7 of them. The first one, the consistency principle. What does this principle state? The consistency principle states that right reason and right faith cannot contradict themselves. Right reason. Now, what you know about the world, about empirical data, the functioning and operations of the world using your right reason cannot contradict what God has revealed concerning the world. That is right faith, right reason cannot contradict themselves, because, as I earlier mentioned, faith and reason are tools that the human mind uses to attain truth, and truth is one. So the truth of faith and the truth of reason cannot be contradictory, because if they contradict, it will mean that truth is not one. I give an example, very beautiful example. Now, according to faith, a man called Jesus Christ rose from the dead. That is faith. Let us move to reason. From evidence, empirical evidence, it is impossible for a dead person to rise from the dead. That's a contradiction. It will appear so that faith, what faith states and what reason states, is contradictory. But of course, when you look deeply, you see that there's no contradiction. What does faith hold? A man, Jesus, rose from the dead. What does reason hold? Man, a dead person cannot rise from the dead. Of course, a dead person cannot rise from death. Is true under natural forces, under natural operations of the world. But our faith teaches us that Jesus Christ rose from the dead by the power of God. That is where the contradiction is wiped out. If the faith simply said man can rise from the dead by natural forces, meanwhile evidentially it is wrong, that is where there will be a contradiction. The second thing, the role of reason is service to the faith. Reason serves, reason facilitates the understanding of the faith. In the words of the great Christian thinker Thomas Aquinas, the man I love to quote so much, he said, reason is the handmaid of faith. Reason is the tool with which we understand the faith. By the use of our reason, we are capable of piercing through some truths of revelation. For example, again, the mystery of the incarnation. Why did God have to take the form of man to be born and redeem man? We can understand this if we start from understanding the concept of means and end, that we from reason, that every means lead to an end. The incarnation is leading to the salvation of man. It is a means to an end. The next principle, the support principle, right reason always support right faith. Right reason always support right faith. Our reasoning makes us to support, understand the things of the faith. Furthermore, faith is the perfection of reasoning. Reasoning is a human tool. By its nature, it is limited. So many questions that we cannot answer with our reason. Of course, the fulfillment principle, there are so many questions that our reason raise that we cannot answer unless we appeal to faith. For example, man will always ask the question, what happens to me after death? What on earth am I here for? Those are the fundamental questions that the reason will raise. But the reason does not have these answers. So reason has to make appeal to faith. That is why I said faith is a perfection of reasoning. Faith perfects reasoning, as Pope John Paul II mentioned in his encyclical Fides et Ratio, published in 1998. Faith perfects, it completes reasoning. Without faith, our reasoning is incomplete, is limping, and cannot lead us to the truth, the full truth, the panoramic truth that we seek. With this, I come to the end of the first part of my arguments.
Interesting arguments put forth there by Jude Aka Zong Seminarant, who is debating on the other side against the motion that faith is the suicide of reasoning. He has been able to relate to us how much these two components of human being are able to come together to complement each other. Now, we come back to the opposing camp that is arguing for the motion, and this time around we are going to give you 6 minutes to you, Franklin Fomokong, to expound, to counteract what Jude has been able to put forth here. And your time starts now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, for giving me the opportunity to debate or to say a word or two on such a sensitive topic. Faith is the suicide of reason. And I also thank my partner here with me in the studio who has set the pace for my arguments today. Now, the statement, faith is the suicide of reason, implies one thing: that religious faith and rational thoughts cannot be simultaneously held together. A person of faith cannot exercise his full rational powers, or vice versa. Faith either kills reason or reason kills faith. I begin today by making a statement. It's a statement that proves nothing, but throughout my debate I shall be proving what this statement says. The statement is: faith is a virus, and every virus has various media through which it is contaminated. And the virus called faith is contaminated through 3 channels. First, either through charismatic preachers or priests or pastors as we have around, or through holy books like the Bible or the Quran, or through our ancestors. Faith is hereditary, my dear brothers and sisters. We inherit the faith we have today from our parents. Think of it. If you were born in ancient Greece, today you will be worshipping Zeus. If you were born a Viking, then you will be worshipping Thor. If you are born a Christian, then you will be worshipping the Judeo-Christian God Yahweh. Kids don't come from the womb with a religion. There is no child who is born a Christian, or who is born a Jew, or who is born a Muslim. We give them these ideas. That is why for some religions like Christianity, they always advise that baptize these children when they are infants. Because when they are infants, they cannot think for themselves. I tell you, allow the children. When they grow up, they should take the decision on their own, whether that is the faith they want to acquire for themselves. If we are talking of a 3-year-old child today, we cannot talk of a Catholic 3-year-old child, or of a Protestant 3-year-old child, or of a Muslim 3-year-old child. We simply talk of a Catholic child with Catholic parents, because this child inherits the faith of her parents. Now, another channel through which faith is being disseminated, or through which most people of today, the believer, has his faith, is through childhood illusions. That childhood longing for an elder brother, for a father who protects you who defends you from your enemies. When people come to have these imaginations in their mind, they tend to personalize this imagination. They want to create what Richard Dawkins calls a cosmic big brother. You know, man has a tendency where he always wants somebody ahead of him who will defend him. So when man converts these imaginations, he tries to convert these imaginations into reality, he begins to have faith in his own imaginations. When we so immerse ourselves into these imaginations, illusions, delusions, hallucinations, we tend to say we have religious experiences like that of St. Paul on his way to Damascus in Acts of the Apostles chapter 9. Those are just hallucinations. Why do I refer to faith as irrational, illogical, uncritical, and as a sedative or tranquilizer to rational thought? First point, because religious faith has no evidence for its claims. Absolutely zero evidence for its claims. Faith is belief without evidence. And as we know from our study of knowledge, epistemology, evidence refers to reasons which push the mind to make decisions. Without evidence, religious faith is never certain but based on opinions. So, as opposed to reason, which is based on evidence, proof, and is certain of its claims, faith, on the other hand, is based on absolutely zero evidence. And as such, I tell you, my dear brothers and sisters, panelists here in the studio, since both rest on different foundations, they cannot be consistently held together, and as such, one will kill the other. And in mathematical terminology, I will say faith is inversely proportional to reason. If faith goes up, reason comes down. If reason goes up, faith comes down. We want a faith, my dear opponents, that is reasoned, faith that is rational, and faith that is discoursed, not dogmatic faith. Aldous Huxley tells us that the biggest sin against humanity is believing in anything that comes without evidence. And I tell you, faith makes smart and intelligent people believe in stupid things. Just ask a believer today, why do you believe what you believe? That individual, out of 10, 8 of them become defensive and angry. And they become defensive simply because they know that there is no rationale behind the claims of their faith. They are afraid and ashamed to accept that what they believe in makes no sense. That is why a very serious author, keep his name in mind, Sam Harris, wrote a certain book, End of Faith. And in this book, he tells us that faith promotes two things. First, violence. Think of the religious wars that have been fought in history. Crusades, terrorisms. Think of the beginning of several terrorist groups in the world. ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram. If you go through your news today, you see in northern Nigeria how Christians are being killed by Muslims. The other day I went through the newspapers and I saw how 40 Christians were attacked in a church in northern Nigeria by Boko Haram members. All of this is because of the faith which these Muslims want to propagate using force. Faith has led to a lot of violence. Number two, Sam Harris tells us, faith promotes irrational thinking. It causes people to stop asking questions. The statement, God did it, has killed rational inquiry. Why is the world the way it is? Because God did it. Reason, dead. Why do planets orbit the sun? No, because God made it so. Reason, dead. You cannot think. You cannot think because you always want to put in God where reason has not arrived at. That is why when Napoleon asked a famous scientist, Laplace, where does God fall in his equations of the universe? Laplace told him he does not need that mystical force because the universe for him is comprehensible to man. And I tell you, my dear brothers and sisters, take the case of Galilei the Galileo, who was persecuted by the church because of his anti-biblical cosmology. Galileo, like Copernicus, told us that the earth revolves around the sun in the solar system. But since philosophers and religious men of his time had as the status quo drawn from the Bible, Joshua chapter 10, that the sun revolves instead around the earth, because in Joshua chapter 10, Joshua told the sun to stand still. So the religious claim was that the sun instead revolves around the earth. But Galileo said no. Scientific innovation, he said no, that's not how it is. The earth instead revolves around the sun. What happened? He was persecuted. He died. I would rather have questions, my dear brothers and sisters, without answers, than have answers that I cannot question. It's almost time I end with a little story. True story. 1,000 years ago, during the Islamic Golden Age, the intellectual center of the world, the Sede Sapientia, seat of wisdom, was Baghdad, the capital of Iraq. Between 800 to 1200 AD, while Europe was busy killing and fighting religious battles, Baghdad grew in unprecedented scientific, economic, and cultural innovations. If you look at some of the innovations that grew out of Baghdad during that period, algebra, the growth of algorithms, algebra by Al-Kharazmi. You know algebra, 2x plus 2 equals to 4, find x, that's algebra, basic algebra, for example. The Arabic numerals grew out of Baghdad during that. On our TV screens, we can see a certain phone number there. Those are Arabic numerals. They grew out of Baghdad because thinkers came together. They sat and they discussed the ideas. But the turning point in this story was in the year 1258, when this golden age drew to a close because Baghdad was attacked, what is called the sacking of Baghdad. Now, another period came when the Islamic religion and culture grew. But conversely, science and technological innovations did not grow with this religion. Why? When we look a little deeper, we see that in Baghdad was a certain man called Al-Ghazali. He was a Muslim cleric. He wrote a certain book, and in that book he stated, mathematics and the manipulation of numbers is the work of the devil. That statement ended all scientific innovations in Baghdad until today. The Islamic world, when it came to science, collapsed and never recovered. That is why in the history of the Nobel Peace Prize in the sciences, just one Muslim has won a Nobel Peace Prize in the sciences, Abdul Salam. With this, I clearly tell you that faith is the suicide of reason, and both cannot be simultaneously held together. Thank you.
Thank you. Franklin Fomukong. What a display of mastery and context there. With the key and catchy phrase is that faith is hereditary, if that's what I got from you, and every other thing has been surrounded around that. Now, let's get the person who is going to brush down what you've said. And for those of you back at home, I want to believe that you're having a short time watching Dmrtv Debate. So let's have the second opponent on this issue that faith is suicidal, and we are going to introduce Yannick Fonke, who is already on standby with his own 6 minutes to explicate on this. Yannick, let's go.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and congratulations to the members of the other side for putting up a very strong argument. Well, I stand on the motion that faith is not suicide of reasoning, and I like to give you very good facts. And just to put it in another way, I stand for the motion that faith and reasoning complement rather than contradict each other, as my opponents have been putting. Now, I want to give you a very short story to put through that reason is not all that we need on earth, and then I'm going to substantiate all of that. Now, there was this great theologian come philosopher who, at his point of thinking and figuring how the earth was shaping, argued in his spirit that there exist no three persons in one God. And this theologian, come philosopher, put his effective reasoning together and said it would never be possible. How can there be three persons in one God? And with that, he moved around, boasting and saying, reasoning or rationally, it can be proven. Well, he moved around the beach and then saw a little child transporting water from the sea to a hole, doing the process repeatedly. And this philosopher cum theologian questioned in his spirit, what is this little child doing? Transporting with a tiny spoon from the sea to a ditch, from the sea to a hole. I said, little boy, what are you doing? He said, I want to transport all this sea inside this hole with this spoon. I said, it's impossible. You cannot do that. And the child was doing it, and he said, stop, you can't do it. And then the child turned toward him. It is the same way. Reason doesn't solve it all. You cannot figure out why there are three persons in one God. So you deal with it. We're talking about Thomas Aquinas. You can do the reference. Now, I like to say faith and reason complement each other, even in the society where we live. It is not everything that is reason oriented or can be backed by reasoning, all attached. No, it is not. For instance, it is never, we can attach reasoning to accomplishment of success. It is backed by faith and some moral principles. If you go to school, it is not a passport you'll be successful. So, if you reason that the systematic presentation of facts and a chronological assessment of things to form reasoning is all it takes to be what it is, then it is failure. There is always aspects of reasoning, of faith to attach to it to make sure things happen. What about our basic rights, our fundamental rights, the human rights? They are not all oriented on reasoning, but on faith. They're oriented on faith. To say that somebody is wrong, you cannot exclusively prove using science. Sometimes you need the conscience of the person, which of course, that is believing without necessarily proven beyond human comprehension. And again, that same theologian or philosopher, St. Thomas Aquinas, had indicated, alongside another very important philosopher, Immanuel Kant, that faith and reasoning complement each other, not compete as we see it. It is not everything science has been able to prove. Even, in fact, there is a French philosopher who said, if there was no God, humans will find something to hold your faith to. Because it is on that principle that would shape the morality and critical well-being of the human. That is why man may have very gods, but they believe there is somebody who looks up to them and orient your mindsets. Look at all the philosophers. The Aristotle, look at all of them. They believed in a supreme being. They may put it in another way. That is belief. That is faith. To tell you, reason would never and ever surmount everything. There is an amount of faith that is needed to push through. So, I stand here to say, faith complements reasoning rather than suicide. It is suicidal to say faith is suicide of reasoning. Because in our very existence as humans, we need some amount of faith to be able to even apportion our reasoning, to be able to position our reasoning. So, with all that said, I conclude by saying faith complements reasoning. Reasoning complements faith. And unlike what the member of the oversight said, that faith is indirectly proportional, inversely proportional to reasoning, I would say faith is directly proportional to reasoning. They work hand in tandem. That is to say, in anything you reason, you need some amount of faith in it for it to work squarely. And mind you, conclusively, to say, if we consider religious intolerance that sometimes lead to over excess and death to be an aspect of faith, then we are making a lot of wrongs. Because even in history and in the Bible, we had people who killed to protect their land, and not necessarily for a god, but for their land. And people commit all kinds of offenses. So sometimes we have extremists, but that will not define the core that faith is a suicide of reasoning. Instead, it helps to shape and give us more faith to be able to reason properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Yannick Funky. Well, I really think it's a powerful opinion there as far as faith and reasoning is concerned. And you're bringing to us the complementarism between faith and reasoning, not seeing them as separate entities, but each complementing each other. Let's have the last person for the motion who is going to speak for 4 minutes to give an overview and give the final points of this other side we're also arguing for. So, Brother Jordan, let's go.
Thank you once more, moderator. As a means of conclusion, only a dog to bite someone without reasoning. Why? Because the master had trained it that when once he sees a visitor, a stranger, he barks and he bites immediately. Only someone who is not rational enough can pick up guns and machetes to kill the fellow humans, because the faith says for you to propagate your faith, anybody who stands as a barrier to it, strike off the person. Which means faith is a suicide of reasoning. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I exist. That statement was made by a philosopher who believed, but the faith could not even permit him to arrive at the truth. He could only ascertain he exists only when he started thinking, or he realized he was thinking. So, don't you think faith is a suicide of reasoning? Let me put two areas together. The medieval period and the Enlightenment age. During the medieval period, a level of development was very low. Technological advances was low. But during the Enlightenment, man had to engage the reasoning faculty. Man had to engage the reasoning capacity to the height or to the peak. Only then could we advance in certain things and in certain domains. But when we relied on faith, we were moving backward. That is why the philosophers could only be turning around one particular aspect. But once the Enlightenment, when they had to enthrone reason, then we saw the differences. So it means faith itself doesn't only kill reason, but it kills even human progress. That should be added as a clause to it. That faith is a suicide of reason and human progress. Faith limits man's thinking capacity, because she imposing her doctrines and her teachings on man. It makes man to even tremble in fear to question certain aspects of faith. So don't you think faith alone is a suicide of reasoning? Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Jordan, for making it snappy and straight to the point, putting it straight to us that faith kills reasoning. Now, Brother Jordan Akazong, you equally have 4 minutes maximum to cement the argument you and Yannick Fonke have been making here.
Thank you very much, the moderator. Now, this evening, I have the feel that we are missing out something. This part of this part of the team, we are not saying that faith alone suffices in attaining truth, because that would be heretic and extreme. They believe that faith alone can explain or is the only means to truth. That is not the point of contention. That is an extreme. And the other extreme, which should be avoided, is rationalism. The first extreme is fideism. The second is rationalism. They believe that reason alone is sufficient in understanding truth. Now, to cement my argument, of course, I've made the distinction very clear. To cement my argument, I would like to rebuke some of what my opponent Franklin Fomokon was saying. He started by committing a very big fallacy when he said that, thank God he himself said it, that he's going to start by saying something that means nothing. That faith is a virus. Of course, it means nothing, because when I listen, he continued by saying that faith is a virus because it is hereditary. My parents are Catholic, that's why I'm a Catholic. It is false. That's a fallacy. To argue is a fallacy of hasty generalization. To say that faith is a virus because it is hereditary, we mean that everything that is hereditary is a virus. Is my nationality a virus because I inherited it? Is my genotype a virus because I inherited it? That's the fallacy my opponent committed. Maybe you can say my nationality is a virus because I'm a Cameroonian. Probably if I was an American, I would not be a virus. But it is fallatic to say that because something is inherited, it is a virus. That's a fallacy. Now, the next extreme my opponent went is empiricism, where he quoted the beautiful example of a story of a place where they kept aside faith. I don't know, can we really keep aside faith? Faith can never be kept aside, because the springboard, what enables reason to start, is faith, is belief. When the empiricists say that knowledge begins by sense perception, for a thing to be considered true, it must be verified. We must have evidence, as you were saying. That is a belief. You cannot empirically prove to me, you cannot give me evidence to the point that for a thing to be true, it has to be verified. That is a belief. That is a foundation of faith. That's why I say faith and reason are complementary. Before you move to reasoning, you must presuppose, you must believe in your senses. If I say, okay, what I touch, what I feel, what I hear, if those are the sources of truth, it means that I've started by believing that truth comes through the senses. That is still faith. The complementarity. Furthermore, to show that faith equally requires reason is in the nature of revelation. Revelation presupposes reason. God could only reveal himself to rational beings. That is why dogs, cats, pigs, they don't know about God, because they are not rational. They don't have the ability to think. So faith requires reason. In the same light, faith corrects and perfects reason. Faith corrects reason. As my opponent was saying about progress, development at the time when they kept aside reason. Now, that is a false mentality. That is materialism. When man is led to falsely believe that he is only material, that there is nothing beyond what I can see, what I can touch. That is materialism. But faith comes in to teach us, to make us understand that beyond the material there's another dimension of man that even reason itself proves. Of course, it's worth noting that every serious thinker, every person who used his reason well will always come to a point that he will have to make a way for faith. I will go back to the philosopher which my companion was quoting, Immanuel Kant, the great German philosopher. At some point after Immanuel Kant has taught, he has written his critique of pure reason, his critique of judgment, and all his theories, he had to say, at the end, I had to make way, I had to put reason aside so that faith would take the lead. Faith is not opposed to reason. Reason is not opposed to faith, but they both complement each other. To end, I would like to prove to us how it is observed and it's even inconceivable to say that faith is a suicide of reason without a contradiction. Because when you look at the words, faith is a suicide of reason. How can you say B is a suicide of A when suicide means killing the self? You would have said something like faith is the murderer of reasoning. It will make sense. Or faith is the killer of reasoning. But to say faith is the suicide is a contradiction in terms. That is to show us that faith, as John Paul II will write in his encyclical Fides et Ratio, faith and reason are two wings on which the human mind rises to contemplate the truth. Faith is not fideism. It's not irrational or believing without faith. Everything that somebody says because maybe he's putting on a cassock like me is true. Your child is sick, don't take your spirit. That's fideism. That's those are emotions. Those are psychological disturbance. That's not faith. That's not faith. Fides qualis intellectum. Faith seeks to understand. Faith wants to know. Faith does not contradict reason. That's not. And the other extreme, rationalism, which had its peak in the Enlightenment period when we thought we could explain everything with our reason. If you go by only our reason, we will still have so many questions unanswered. And I ask to those who think that reason does not need faith, what on earth are you here for? Can your reason provide that answer? After life, have you thought of the end of your life? The end, not just maybe dying is not still the end, because after dying, probably your brain will be somewhere or something. You cannot just cease to exist like that. Reason cannot provide us with these answers because our reason is limited. That is why we need the light of faith. As the great Christian thinker Augustine will develop his theory of the illumination of the human mind. God coming to help the mind to know truth. Illumination. The mind needs to be shown light. The light of faith that illumines our path, as Katina Sarah will keep on mentioning in God or Nothing. The light that is capable of bringing, faith is the light that is capable of bringing beauty, newness, freshness in every aspect of human life. To end, faith and reason are two wings on which the human mind rises to contemplation of the truth. Thank you.
Thank you, Jude Akazon. And what else, if not such intellectual exposition, and he has been able to bring out from every aspect, spiritually, philosophically, and even using reason itself to expatiate on that fact. Thank you, Jude. Well, if you are just joining us, you're on Dmrtv Debate, and if you at this point you have not been able to grasp so much, then I don't know. I just don't know. Let's have this break. We'll be back to have the church's stance and then have some final rounds right here. Right. Now, in our debate, every edition, we have a priest who gives us what the church says on the topic we're discussing on. And this evening, we're going to be listening to Father Benjamin Fon of St. Martin the Porres Parish in Bokwango. Our debaters have been able to put forth their very logical thoughts, their intellectual reasonings on the table from every end. But I told you that their arguments are not basically what they think. It is for the sake of the debate, okay? Because if you still switch these guys on the other side, they'll tell you some wonderful ideas that you like. But let us get to meet Father Benjamin Fon and hear what he says. Now, he's not able to be with us here in the studio, but this is what he says. Father Benjamin says, in his encyclical Fides et Ratio, Faith and Reason, Pope John Paul II elaborates extensively on these two aspects, referring to them as two wings on which the human person ascends to the truth. They are certain and objective truths which can be arrived at through human intellect. That is with the use of reason. All right. So there are some truths that with the use of reason cannot conveniently be arrived at. Father Benjamin continues to say, faith then serves as the only means through which one arrives at such realities which the intellect cannot comprehend. Holding on to such a statement that faith is suicide of reasoning can be likened to the famous statement of the German philosopher Karl Marx, who stated that religion is the opium of the people. But that is not the case. They complement each other at different inquiries. Signed, Reverend Father Benjamin Fon. And gentlemen, I don't want to comment on this, but for those who watch back at home, they know what you said. They have been able to digest what you have said, and they know where they now stand. But from here, what I advise is you always stand on the right side. Pick your side which is right, and you stand on it. And of course, the position of the church as given here by Father Benjamin Fon. Brother Franklin Fomokong, who argued for the motion that faith is the society of reasoning, thank you for coming. Thank you for your discourse, and we hope that we are going to use this in future for many other for people to get to understand what all this is about. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jude, and I thank the debate team for coming out with such topical topics. I pray the one of next week also has such very sensitive dimensions, such that we can speak elaborately on them. They are very good, very good topics.
But Jordan, I'm sure you are one of those convinced that our audience are very much fed tonight with the discourse from here. Thank you for coming, and thank you for everything you've been able to put through.
Thank you very much, moderator.
On the other side, those who argued against. Brother Jude Aka, this evening has been exceptional. You put forth a very wonderful argument. I'm not a judge, but I want to believe that those who watch can testify of how much you were able to place your logical ideas using the same reason which they say faith is not. So, so thank you. I want to believe that to you, this side must have won the debate. Is that?
Of course, we won the debate. It's obvious, even from the church's stand.
All right. So thank you for coming. And Yannick Funky, he's not a seminarian, he's not a priest. He's a colleague of mine who has delved so much and has done quite a lot of research. This I must commend in spirituality, in religious issues, and has been able to come here on the panel to bring out his ideas logically and place them. I'm sure everyone who watches at home who want to think that, well, maybe they can just think you're a priest now. Eh? So, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And thank you very much, all of you who watch back at home. We appreciate your fidelity. Let me just read this I think someone sent a message here. The person says, greeting to all the panelists and courage to you. Faith is first of all a personal adherence of man to God. Refer Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 150. One cannot adhere to this personal faith in God without the capacity of reason. And you say thus, the Catechism of the Catholic Church affirms that without this capacity, that's of human reason, man will not be able to welcome God's revelation. Compare Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 36. And you continue to say, faith, therefore, is not opposed to reason as the church teaches us. And this is Father John Mark Pokwango from CKP in Edinau. Thank you, Father John Mark, for watching. And thank you, special regards to those in Edinau, Christ the King Parish in Edinau. We are so grateful to have listened to you this evening. And we are hoping that next week we'll be here again for another edition of Dmrtv Debate, where we place topical, critical issues of every dimension, even the faith on the table, and give you the opportunity to think just beyond what you know. Incisive arguments from here. I've been Chut Makumunyo. Have a blessed weekend. Bye-bye.